Welcome to Midwest Wanderer, where we explore nature, history, and culture along America's scenic and historic highways and byways. I'm Skip.
And I'm Connie.
Today we're going to take a trip to the Missouri Ozarks, Oregon, Howell, and Ozark County, and visit some mills that date back to the 1800s. We stopped at the Visitor Center in West Plains, Missouri.
And there we picked up a travel guide called Explore West Plains. And in it, we found suggested road trips. And the two that really jumped out at us were about historic mills. They're the Eastern Mills and the Western Mills.
And we did it over two periods, during March, and then we came back in April.
We have seen a couple of these mills while we've been down there other times, but I guess maybe we didn't realize there were so many. So we decided to do a road trip. Like you said, we did it in two parts, some in March and some in April, because they are kind of spread out.
You're covering probably an area of well over 50 miles.
Now, in some of these mills, they're pretty much ruins, not much left to them at all. Others have been very
Fully restored.
I don't think any of them actually mill grain anymore.
No.
They're more for show, more for tourists. But we had fun just exploring and finding where each of them were. The first one we went to was Bo's Mill. And I'll tell you, there wasn't much of that one left. But we drove up and we saw a sign. We were in the Mark Twain National Forest. But we didn't see anything on the sign about a mill. There was a footpath there, so we decided to follow that.
And that was from the parking lot off the roadway.
Right, yeah, just a little parking area. And we finally came to a river, a spring. It was a pretty blue spring. But as far as the mill goes, there's not a lot left. There was a turbine and a rock wall, and the water was still kind of rushing from there. So it was kind of neat. And that was probably the one that had, well, I guess the biggest ruin. Not much left to it at all. From there it went up. Next, we went to Turner Mill, and again, that was another one that was mostly ruins. There's a wheel still standing.
The water wheel is intact. It's fully intact, all rusted.
That's about it. It was a mill that was in a former town called Surprise, Missouri, and surprise, it's not there anymore.
Well, this is set back quite a ways from the parking lot area, so you're going to walk maybe a quarter mile to get back to it.
Oh yeah, it took us a while to find where it was. And that's part of the fun scavenger hunt. Okay, we know that's here somewhere, but where is it?
Well, that's it, because you'll come up upon a parking lot and you may be walking quite a distance back because I placed the mills where the water flow was that would be able to power the mill. And it may not have been convenient for today's travelers, but at that time, it did what it needed to do. They got their water source.
This one apparently didn't do grain. It must have been
Could have been a sawmill.
A sawmill, because the brochure says, and I'll quote from this: teams of oxen hauled the logs out of the river and to the mill.
And the way they would get the logs to the mill was they floated them down the river.
Floated them down the 11-Point River. The next one we saw was the Falling Spring Mill. And when we got there, there was a busload of school kids that were there on a field trip. So we thought, oh, this has to be something here. And we first saw a cabin, and we wondered what that cabin was. Turns out it's the cabin of the founder of the area. Eventually, I guess there were 4 houses there, not a whole lot. But this is the original cabin of Thomas and Jane Brown. And they lived in that cabin, and they built the mill. The mill was, well, I don't know how far away.
Probably a couple 100 feet.
Yeah, not too bad. But it actually built up against the side of a hill, and I guess they get the name Falling Spring because the water comes down and drives the water mill. That one was refurbished a little bit, so we spent a little time there, and then we went over to Greer Mill, and there wasn't as much to see there. It was basically a building.
Now, the building's been restored, and they actually use it as some event type center.
Yeah, it wasn't open when we were there.
But it wasn't open there.
Yeah, we took a few pictures, and that was it. But these are spread out enough that there's quite a bit of driving, pretty country driving, as we're going from place to place. So it's a nice ride. So the last one, well, actually, it wasn't a mill that we went to after that. It was Greer Spring Trail. And it was a long trail.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, walking around the lake and the distance where the river is at. Probably 45 minutes to an hour later, we were worried about it getting dark.
Yeah, we were, because we didn't start this until probably
Late
early
afternoon.
afternoon. So, yeah, we spent a half day doing it. And we were worried because it was starting to get dusk. This was March, so the days were shorter. But we did make it down there, and it was well worth the walk.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So that was what we had seen on the Eastern Mills. So we went back in April.
At the time of the eclipse.
Right, we were there for the eclipse and decided to do a little bit more. And we started out at Dot Mill. Now, we have been very familiar with Dot Mill because, well, your aunt and uncle lived down there for years, and we would go down there and take float trips that would come out there. Your aunt and uncle would take us to another location, drop us off, and then pick us up over at Dot. The mill has been rebuilt 3 times. The first mill was, gosh, it dates back to like 1874. And I think it burned down one time, and then another time a competitor burned it down. He paid a kid $10 to go burn the building down. And he did. Problem was, the kid was riding a 3-legged mule, and it was very easy to track who had burned it down. Over the years, different people have owned it, and they've put up an inn, they put up cabins, so you can go down there and stay in these cabins. The mill no longer works, but it's in a beautiful area, and
Restaurant inside the mill.
There is a
good
restaurant in the mill.
inside the mill.
And when we were there in April, we pulled up and a gentleman was standing outside. Turns out it was the owner. Mill wasn't open for business at that time. It wasn't going to open until May. It's more of a seasonal thing. But Ed Henniger is the current owner. And he took us inside, took us on a wonderful tour, showed us how the mill used to operate and what he's done to improve it.
What he's done to restore the condition of the mill.
And there were a lot of pieces of the mill that he showed us that used to do this and it used to do that.
Some of the machinery has been removed or relocated within the mill.
So that was a really nice stop. We were there probably for a good hour or so. It was really nice of him to let us in and show us around. But then after that, we went over to Hodgson Mill. This one, again, we couldn't get inside, but there's a cool waterfall in front of it.
At a cave you can start walking into without any flashlights. We decided not to do that.
Did that look like it had gone very far in?
It did look like it went quite a ways in.
Yeah, it was. I was just standing behind you and turned around and walked out. It was kind of creepy. A lot of the restoration has been done and looks really nice and makes for some beautiful photo ops. Then we went over to Rock Bridge, which we have been to before because it's now a trout farm.
And it's been a trout farm for quite a number of years now.
Right. And we got there, it was late afternoon. We hadn't eaten lunch. We were hungry. They have a restaurant in there. The trout farm, they raise the trout. People can go down there and stay in a lodge and fish. And like I said, the restaurant, it was wonderful. I think it was probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon by the time we got there. So, we were like one of the only ones in there at that time because who eats at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? But it was what I call a dinner, something between lunch and dinner. And it was wonderful. We both chose the special that they had because it sounded so good. It was maple glazed trout.
The food was outstanding.
Food outstanding, service was outstanding. Wonderful place, definitely recommend it. And outside at the mill,
there's a bar area. Looks like they have events or bands come in and play over the weekend.
That's inside the building.
Inside the building.
Yeah. But then you can fish like right by the dam. That was it. We spent probably half a day on each of these. We didn't spend the entire day driving. I guess if you wanted to do a full day and do them all, you could, but it would be a lot of driving. It was the next day, though, that we went over to Blue Spring. And I'll tell you what, I've never seen water so blue outside of like the Caribbean. And this was the one that we walked quite a ways. There was a parking area. We got out and we walked down and we saw where the river was. But then we started taking some of the trails and we had some beautiful views.
You're on bluffs as you're walking up, and the view looking upstream on the river was beautiful.
And this is where you walked over a snake. You're
As
walking
we were
along
coming-
telling me to hang on because, I don't know, there was a little drop off or something, but it wasn't very far down. The water was right there. And I'm looking ahead of me, and here's this snake that you just kind of walked over. So I kind of followed, did the same thing, and you didn't even know the snake was there. I don't know what kind of snake it was. Hopefully it wasn't anything poisonous, but it didn't bite us anyway, so I guess it doesn't
I
matter.
even went back to try and take the picture of the snake, and the snake went into the water.
Jumped off into the water. He sure did. Anyway, that was our experience with the mills. And these aren't the only mills. There are some other ones that are listed in the travel guide. They have a listing of the different mills in the area, and some of them are quite a ways away. There's one in Van Buren, which is probably, 45 minutes to an hour away from there. So if you want to make a separate day trip for that, and there are other things to do in that area as well, that's fine. But what's kind of neat is that this covers more than one county. It's Explore West Plains, but because they give you these day trip options, they're basing it in that town, but then you take a lot of back roads out around other areas and in different counties to see these different things that are historic for the Ozark region in southern Missouri. Alrighty, well, I think that wraps up this session. I'm Connie,
I'm Skip. Safe travels.
and happy travels.